Are you guys freezing? Do you need to turn the thing back?
It's alright, I got a blankie.
I got a blankie. Hold on, I gotta get this one article.
Oh,
Whoa!
Oh, Josh.
Oh.
Technical difficulties.
Alright.
All the time these. Oh, I'm so excited that I did my work for the day and now I get to just kick back and listen to you.
Oh, so.
Okay. It's kind of my favorite.
Alright. You ready, girls?
Yes, yes, you can dive
Let
in.
me just pull this down because I'm gonna be looking down a lot. Lefty loosey, righty tighty. Lefty, thank you. Lefty loosey, righty
And then
tighty.
tilt it, if you're going to be looking down, tilt it like this, because
Yes.
this is where you want your mouth
Okay,
to be.
perfect.
Yeah.
All right. Hello.
Hello.
It's
Is it me you're looking for?
Okay, so I was thinking about what to do next and what the people want and what I want and what I think would be helpful. And I decided that I usually talk about heavy things.
They
And so-
love you the most. If I look in my stats,
Oh,
they love you the
honey,
most.
that's
It's all of your hard things.
well.
that
We're
are
gonna
really
do a
resonating with the people.
Okay.
well. Okay,
I feel
so
like they like me the least, and that's okay.
What?
oh, stop.
That's how I feel. I always talk about nerdy stuff, so people are like,
So what we're gonna do
I think
is
it's just because everyone's
suffering.
suffering.
So
Everyone's
I feel
Everyone's suffering.
I feel you, people.
Yeah.
I feel
So-
you people.
Yeah.
What I think I'd like to do is I would like to kind of deep dive into some of the things we've talked about in the past and just like really kind of like set roots into different sections. Set some roots in because I think we can easily talk about something and it's a podcast and we listen to it and then we move on. And I just want to kind of settle. And what I decided that I thought we should settle in first because
Where shall we settle first?
I think it's the key to all the other things.
Ooh.
So we're gonna start. Oh gosh, I never know if your oohs is because your buzz are about to be a couple of punks. Okay.
Couple punks.
A couple of punks. Okay, so the first thing we're gonna settle into is vulnerability because I believe
Is that our main topic for today?
yes, we're
okay.
going, and it's gonna be a couple part series
Okay, I need to do a couple part series.
because I think that to understand and truly understand vulnerability, you can't move into other things. So like I want to talk about vulnerability and then I want to talk about vulnerability in parenting, vulnerability in your marriage, vulnerability in boundaries. Like but before we do all of those things, we really need to get a grasp about what vulnerability is. And whenever I think of vulnerability, I think of my sister from another mister, Brene Brown. So I read a bunch of articles. I've read her books in the past. I'm going to start rereading her book, Dare to Lead.
Yeah.
And then on my way here, I actually listened to her TED Talk for the 400th time on vulnerability. And I encourage
I love TED Talks.
I encourage
Some of them.
anyone to go listen to her TED Talk. So today, really, I just want to talk about
Filter. I just filtered.
You did?
I did. I was going to get us off track with the side question.
Oh,
I
what
just
is a
gotta
TED
go.
Talk?
Okay. What's the difference between a TED Talk and a podcast?
So TED Talk is in front of a live audience.
Okay.
They're like brilliant people.
And
brilliant
you do,
minds.
and it's 20-minute, like, there used to be this thing called Pachakacha. It was like it's a,
What?
it
Pachakacha?
yeah, that's
Donk
what
it
it's
off.
called. It started out, it was like I feel
Sounds
like
like-
an Asian thing. It's the way it's spelled.
Oh.
But it was like a way of people sharing information with each other, and it's like 30 seconds, 6 pictures, so it's like a
big
6 minute.
concepts. Big.
Yeah, or like,
concepts.
or silly
Oh.
things, or whatever. Like, I did a Pachakasha on how to.
Well, TED Talks aren't typically silly.
Right, but it's the same thing. It's like a way to give information about something in a very digestible piece.
It's, very smart people breaking
Down-
big things
down
down into
to
bite-sized
bite-sized
amounts
pieces.
Okay.
and trying to explain it to you like you're 5 years
Okay,
old.
I
Even
like
though
that.
they're usually very smart people.
Yeah.
Okay.
But they're still trying to bring it to the everyman,
Yeah.
which
Or
is very
something that-
challenging to do.
Where the
Yes.
heck did the name Pachakacha come from?
Oh, that's a TED Talk. Pachakacha is
Oh.
kind of like a TED Talk, even in a smaller scale that they
Okay.
I don't know
started.
what Pachakacha is.
That was started, I believe, in the Asia, like a way, like Japan and Asia, for people to create community. So they would be like teaching someone how to paint, or like, and it was just like this,
Okay.
like fun, kind of like what a YouTube video was before YouTube.
But in real time, like.
In real time in front of people.
Yeah,
like,
okay.
Okay.
Cool. Okay,
So anyway.
sorry, my bad.
It's okay. So everybody listen to Brene Brown's TED Talk on vulnerability.
Mhm.
So today I kind of just want to talk about vulnerability and when the word vulnerability lands on you, when you hear that word, what does it bring up in you? Like, what do you feel, think about, see, all of those things? I want to put my phone on.
It's so diverse. It's so complex
Exactly.
and
Yes.
diverse. And it's like physical vulnerability is nakedness or not feeling comfortable in your own skin, but being willing to show it anyway.
Perfect. Okay, what about when you hear the word vulnerability? What do you think about?
I immediately think of like tenderness and like when someone's vulnerable with me, I picture them taking their walls down and exposing their true self, and that what a gift that is that they're giving. So it makes me have compassion. It makes me immediately love them more.
So good.
Yeah. So I mean, one thing. So I have psoriasis, and it's that for my whole life. I don't remember a day where I didn't have some on my body, and I still have some. I don't hardly have any thanks to plexus anymore, and really that is the reason. It's the thing that changed it. But my gut was clearly missing some really important things. But how I felt and still struggle with sometimes, although nothing like before. And our culture has shifted so much to be more accepting of everyone's bodies, almost to a fault, I think, in some ways. Just, but like, so much more accepting of flaws and like that. No one's perfect. Even the beautiful people, first of all, if you're seeing a picture, they're airbrushed 90% of the time, and it's like, to me, vulnerability with my body is accepting that it's not perfect, accepting that it's getting older, knowing that I have spots that are bad skin, unhealthy skin that show up for reasons that make me sad, but it's just who I am. It's one of the things I struggle with, but I follow a bunch of girls on Instagram who have like head to toe psoriasis, like their whole bodies are covered in these white, flaky, scaly sores all the time. They cannot seem to find a way to, like their body is just riddled with it. And yet they're living their best life and they're out there showing their bodies. Like, and to me, that is a true vulnerability when you are covered head to toe in what most people are going to be like, oh gosh, what is wrong with you? I have had that happen many times to me. What's wrong with your knees? What's wrong with your elbows? What's on your elbows? That's gross. Ew, I'm so sorry you have that. It's like, but that first, the ew. And it's like, to know that that's how people respond to something that looks yucky, that's a part of who you are, and still show it. One of my biggest regrets in high school is that I didn't wear dresses and shorts and short sleeve shirts. I covered up my skin as much as even when I went to semi-formal, and bless his heart, Aaron McGuire, I was his date for semi-formal, and I wore a long sweater and a long velvet skirt because I was too embarrassed about my skin. I was tiny. I had an adorable face. I was a runner, if you can believe it. Back then I had a great body by, typical standards, and yet I was so embarrassed about my skin that I covered every inch of it, high neck, everything, because I had psoriasis all over me, and I was so embarrassed, and it would have been embarrassing. People would have stared, but I was like, I'm so sad that I wasn't like, this is how God made me. I don't know what's wrong with me, but it is who I am. It's a part of who I am, and I'm gonna own it. But that was not the culture when we were back then, and it was not. I had no strength. I had no strength of character in those days to be that brave. And I was not ever vulnerable with anybody in that way. And it's taken my whole life to be vulnerable in that way. I mean, now I was like, probably to many people's chagrin, I wear a bikini as a 45-year-old woman who's had 2 giant babies when I go camping, and I was like, and I'm not 100% comfortable with my body, but I was like, I'm letting it be.
Mhm.
I am letting it be what it is, and I am loving who I am, and I'm accepting it. And I think there's resignation and acceptance of who you are, and like, just like this is who I am, and I'm okay with my body, and I want some sun on my tummy, and that's why I'm doing this. And it's actually making up for years where I didn't have the self-confidence, even though I had a body that was before children. But it's, I don't know, it's definitely taking walls down. It's taking walls that either we built up or that are just automatically there, working hard to take those down.
Those are good. So vulnerability, by definition, is basically uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure. It's about exposure. I love that word.
Yeah. So good.
And one of the things that is interesting about vulnerability is that it's kind of a crossroads. And so we as people need to be taught how to deal with uncertainty and how to deal with emotional risk. And so in a lot of ways, people either put up walls, or they overexpose, or there's different ways when any sort of uncertainty, emotional, physical, anything comes into your space of how you respond. And your childhood is affected by that. You know, Brene Brown talks about how she went to a therapist and she was doing all this research, and she was like, I need help, but I don't want to get into the family stuff. And the therapist just started laughing. So how we deal our vulnerability is all can be traced back with how our childhood was, our experiences in childhood, or things like that. So trying to outsmart vulnerability, if you're afraid of it, actually blocks us. So whenever we try to make a situation black or white, good or bad, it actually limits what potential of vulnerability.
Right, we're already deciding the outcome.
Yes.
We've become a legalist.
We're assuming how everybody feels about something.
We're making things certain and definite that are not allowed to be certain or definite. So vulnerability, vulnerability is a limitlessness. And that's very scary to a lot of people. So I actually am really encouraged that both of you, it was interesting that both of you talked about a positive viewpoint. And that's one of the things that Brene Brown said. She said that we see other people's vulnerability as greatness, and we see our vulnerability as weakness. And that is what shame is. So shame is when we see other people being vulnerable and thinking they're so brave, I love them even more. But when we think of ourselves being equally as vulnerable, we feel that we're being weak, pathetic, shameful, no one would love us if we put our walls down, those kinds of things. And so that, she said, that's the trickiness of vulnerability. We love it in other people, but we're terrified of it in ourselves.
That's good.
It is
That's
really
really
good.
And true.
And so stinking true.
I mean, I would never want to have an Instagram account that was just about psoriasis.
Right.
Where it was dependent on me showing all the worst parts of my skin
Right.
to everyone.
And that's pretty much what defines her. That's like what her account is.
Yes.
Yeah.
Girl with spots is actually her title, one of them. There's
That's
a lot
awesome.
of them, but one of them is
So vulnerability is a crossroads, and the crossroads are between like shame, like when you're faced with a situation, a coworker, a mistake you made, something. There's two ways you can look at shame, fear, and anxiety. That's one half of vulnerability. The other half is love, creativity, and freedom. And they are both rubbed up against each other. Because when you have the freedom to accept your flaws and everything, that's when that you become limitless. And when you're limitless, you get to be creative. You can see the world in a very different way if you're not boxing everything. So fascinating.
Can you kind of say that all again?
Okay, yeah.
I mean,
so
just like break it down again.
so vulnerability.
Crossroads.
The vulnerability. There's a crossroads
Yeah.
in which you're hit with a situation. Okay,
Yeah.
so you have to have a hard conversation. You made a mistake at work. Your kid is making choices you don't love. Any situation where you're feeling vulnerable about it doesn't fit in a black and white good bad box, and you're starting to panic. My first instinct is always panic before vulnerability. So there's a crossroads. There's two different things. You can feel shame, fear, and anxiety. That's one way of looking at. And we're going to talk about that kind of today a lot. And then there's love, creativity, and freedom. If you allow yourself to be vulnerable, you allow yourself to be loved. Like you were saying about that person, you are allowing that other person to love you in your flaws and in your weakness and in your vulnerability. You allow yourself to be open to creativity, and you give yourself the freedom to find out, like find the root of stuff. That kind of like settling in and finding like, why am I even panicking about this? Why is...
Or to look for like a more positive outcome.
Right, or any
versus
outcome.
Like the more, I'm going to close myself off to this and
Right.
hide in a pit.
And then the others is, I can't tell my truth in this situation. I can't feel this because I'm riddled with shame. I'm riddled with fear, and I'm riddled with anxiety. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to put on my bootstraps. I'm going to yank them up. I'm going to wall myself off. I'm going to wear clothes down to the eternal, sweater and a long velvet dress, skirt, and I'm going to cover. And I'm just gonna walk through this, and I'm going to be perfect. So perfection is a lack of vulnerability. That is
perfectionism, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So what I found so fascinating, why did I put this on airplane and it's still binging at me? Stop it. What we do when we are afraid and filled with shame and we don't press into vulnerability are three things. I thought this was crazy. We numb, we perfect, and we pretend.
Is this what Brene Brown said?
Yes. Isn't she so smart? I want to be like her when I grow up. So smart. So we numb it with food, medication. She was talking about the stats. Alcohol, drugs.
Just watching TV.
For hours and
not
hours.
addressing it.
Numb. Just numbing it. And she said the thing about that is that as human beings, we cannot numb just one feeling. You can't just numb fear. You have to numb all the feelings. So when you are numbing your fear, you are also numbing your joy. When you are numbing your anxiety, you are also numbing your thankfulness. You cannot pick and choose what you numb.
Yeah.
Whoa, that was a major for me as I was praying through this.
Because it means you're not dealing with it.
But you're
right.
You're
just sort
numbing,
of like hitting pause, and you're just surviving.
Right.
You're not
So you
dealing
think
with it.
She was so funny. She was like, in her TED Talk, she said, so you get nervous and you feel shame, so you have 2 beers or you eat a banana nut muffin. And everybody in the audience started laughing. She goes, I have hacked in people's lives for over a decade. I know you're laughing as, ha ha ha, oh crap, she knows the truth.
Yeah.
Because you think you're numbing your fear. You think you're numbing your anxiety. You think you're numbing your shame, but along with numbing those things, you are also numbing your ability to feel joy. You're numbing your ability to feel thankfulness. You can't just choose one or the other. And that I thought was really great for me, and I thought really great for us as people to kind of just settle on that a little bit. Like when I Netflix binge, which is what I do when or doom scroll.
All winter long, baby. All winter long.
We're numbing our anxiety, our sadness, but we are also numbing our ability to find joy in the day, find thankfulness, find gratefulness. So both things happen.
Right, because it's really just like coping. It's like you're calling it coping, but you're hitting
coping.
pause on a lot of your life to just sort of,
Basically, you're disassociating.
Yeah, and hitting pause on whatever the thing is, because as soon as you're done,
Unpause,
as you're done, your show or your muffin, it's still there.
Yeah.
Sad but true.
And
And
now
that-
you just ate a muffin.
Well, and that's what she
I'll
said.
have another.
So she said, we are the most, our cohort, our generation of people are the most medicated, the most obese, and the most addicted.
And our poor children, that's how they're being brought up. Like
To be overweight, addicted, and numb. We are raising a numb generation because of the second piece, which is we perfect. So we try to put on a veneer, social media on nobody, that makes everything look so pretty. And she talked about children specifically in this part. We want our kid to be perfect. We want them to be she said, she goes, a tennis all-star at 5 and accepted at Yale by 7. And she said,
ugh, that sounds terrible, actually, to me.
But she said,
I get it.
like, and I, it freaks me out as a mother. Like, she said, children are actually born for adversity. Literally, they come out of the womb and they are completely dependent on everything for everyone to love them and be kind to them. And we actually wipe that away from them by making them feel like they don't need anything, and we make their lives this soft, cozy place. And she's like, actually, we should make them know you are imperfect and you are completely dependent and you are loved.
And
That's-
life is hard.
Right.
And you are loved
And
and you
you
are
are-
worthy.
Yeah.
And that we do the opposite. We try to make everything easy for them. So children start thinking, I am loved because everything is perfect. And we create these little perfect bots. These little children that go out on the basketball court per your last episode, and we get angry that other children are doing well or better than our children. And we get frustrated, and we always say it's not the sport
Perfect bots.
Yes, we're
Yeah.
making these little robots that believe that their worthiness is in perfection.
If you win, I'll
you
give
win.
you.
Yeah, if you, and that crushed me. Because I was like, am I doing that to my children? And if I am,
I'm definitely at fault for trying to create a cozy life and don't want them to experience hard. But that's only because I did, and I was born into adversity,
Right.
and wasn't definitely allowed to. I wasn't even allowed to cope
right.
or talk to cope, so I didn't have any of those skills. But I had to learn all of that as an adult, and still learning it.
Right.
Still learning it, and all of this rings so hard to me because
It's so, that's why we're settling in it, guys.
I think
We're
we
just
all
gonna settle in
want
it.
to be. There's a part of us that wants to be vulnerable, and because we want to be loved for who we are. We want to be vulnerable, but when we have a head to toe skin disease, or when we don't feel confident in our skills as a human being, even as a child, especially as a child, and we don't feel unconditionally loved and accepted in the environment that we are in, and we don't have a choice but to be there, that whole balance, either it's not even there in the first place for a lot of people, or it starts to break down.
So that's where that uncertainty and learning how to manage emotional risk is. So how do we, as mothers, especially as believers, how do we say, because we all know we have all sinned and fallen short of the glory of God, right? Like, so that's the whole point. Like, how do I say, you are broken. You are failing at this. And I love you anyway. And how do we fix this? How do we get through this hard thing? But you still own it. The no excuse boundary. Like, well, it was
So
their
good.
fault. It was their fault. I would have done better.
ownership.
Yes.
It's extreme ownership.
Extreme, like,
Extreme ownership.
It's a book. I guess I can't remember the title of the author, but that's basically teaching our
Yes.
kids that.
like, I failed here. So, like, in our household, I don't manage grades.
Nope.
Especially in high school.
You don't anymore. We did for a long time, and then.
So, but this is our rule. You are almost an adult. Little kids, this is different, but I'm talking about teens. You know what your grades are. We're going to ask you, and you're going to tell us the truth. And if you're struggling with something, you're going to come to us and be vulnerable and tell us. When we get the progress report and we find out that you're struggling in something on the progress report and not from your mouth, your life is about to become a lot smaller. But if you come to us and say, I totally just bombed this math test, here's my plan, we say, good, okay, so what's your plan? How can we help you with your plan? And let me tell you, it's a totally different life, because they now have to be vulnerable and come to us and say,
and responsible.
That's
and
the thing.
break it down. And because that's the real world, and that's learning to manage their risk and manage their emotional things. So
Can I speak into that just a little bit?
yes, please.
I was just listening to a podcast the other day. This lady, I can't remember what she's she has a whole website, a whole company called Screen Sanity. And so her whole thing is on, like, she's like, when we really think about it, us moms our age, we're the first generation raising kids. She calls them digital natives. She's like, they're the first generation who that's all they know. It's the only truth that they know is they're being raised in the digital age. And all the things, and it's even out of their control. Classes, sports teams, everything. And so she's like, but as moms, we can't go to our parents and be like, Mom, what did you do? Like, baby-wise, when you first get pregnant, you can read all the books and you can talk to other moms about who had babies before. What can I expect when my baby comes? Right? Like, we've had people who've gone ahead of us. We don't have anybody ahead of us. So we're learning and we're figuring it out. And culture's teaching us, right? If you buy for $5 extra, your 5-year-old can have their own phone. What a great deal, right? And so what she's talking about, coping skills, that's the biggest thing, because she's like, media is not bad. Like, phones aren't bad. Social media is not like, we can make it black and white, you know? And so she's like, but what we have to teach our kids is these digital natives who know nothing else. And as moms, to figure it out, like, coping skills at a really young age. She's like, when we were little and our mom was taking us grocery shopping and we were bored, what did we do? We dealt with it. Or maybe there's a little bit of an embarrassment of the mom's baby freaking out, or the mom said, smarten up now, or when we get to the car, there's going to be a consequence. She's like, now it's, here's my phone, you can play a game on it. You know, and so that gets the mom through Target happily. But what does it teach the kid? It teaches them nothing on how to manage their boredom. It teaches them nothing on how to manage sadness or frustration. And so she's like, and so the older they get, she's like, the goal that we want to teach our kids who are these digital natives is when they get to college and they're lonely or they're sad or they're upset like Izzy, that the answer isn't in solitude on their phones alone, doom scrolling. It's like, okay, so like community, calling your mom, call your brother, kind of figuring out that's more than just this.
Join the backstage. Izzy's now doing theater.
Right.
What a thought. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Like, taking the risk. Yes.
And so statistically, because she does all of the science behind it, she's like, it used to be that I wrote it down because it was so crazy. Okay, it used to be in our day and age 2 weeks between signs, the very first sign of suicidal tendencies to the action itself. Like, there was this window where, like, looking back, you can be like, oh yeah, I saw that. She's like, today it can be minutes or even hours between like a tendency and it actually happening. And so her whole thing is like,
no management of risk.
yeah,
There's
and
no
coping skills and vulnerability and having those conversations, and just like the whole like teaching our like the ownership of, and when you're sad, when you're mad, when you're bored, when you're lonely, instead of just your phone or your media, how do we like get the creativity, get the joy, get the do you know what I'm trying to say?
Well, this isn't quite to vulnerability, but my boys and myself, I do a lot of multitasking, so I love having background noise, and I do a lot of my creative stuff with a show in the background or something like that. But my children, that's like, they'll just get sucked into the show.
Yes.
So
we cannot have any show on in the background of our house. It could be the most boring thing in the world, and all the kids are like,
yeah, right. So they're not wired that way.
Yeah.
So my husband isn't really either. So I've had to be very careful about and just pay attention. And after school hours, it's tricky. I always give them a little bit of time to chill with their devices, but then I'd be like, boys, you gotta bring your phones in the kitchen, and like, you need to do something. You need to go do something active, go outside, play basketball. You need to, but and most of the time now, if I say it's time to have device free, and that means TVs, it means any screen.
Mm-hmm.
My 2 children, because they're cut out of the same cloth, start to create.
Mm-hmm.
So Sam will pick up his musical instruments. He plays so many instruments, he will go play music. He will start writing songs. He will start playing his guitar. Henry will get out pencils and paper and start to draw and create. And he'll, and I only see that if I tell them it's time to put your phones down. It's time to be alive and create something. For them, that's what that means.
Mm-hmm.
Or they'll and like after that time goes by, they might start literally cleaning their room, or like they'll ask each other, because they have only each other in these little hours. It's like, you want to go play hoops with me, and so they'll see each other and spend that time.
But default mode is never going to be that.
Default, it's so easy. It's like, it's I'm going to be entertained. I'm bored, I'm going to be entertained. And I am so guilty of that as well. So if I have time, there's a dopamine hit, there's science behind all the things.
There is so much, yeah.
But it's easy. It's so easy. It's like, I don't have to output anything. I can just sit here and be entertained by any one of a million different things. I can go online shopping. I can do this. I could check my email for the 50th time. I could check my text. I can check Be Real. I can check Snapchat. I can look on Pinterest. I can watch a show on YouTube. I could watch a show on TikTok. I could watch a movie. All on my phone.
Right.
And they know this too. And that is like, the digital native culture that they're growing up in. And we really have to help them. This is a whole nother podcast though.
Yeah.
So it's like, not to stay on this tangent,
but no, I think, but what that is that's helping them numb. That's a numbing.
Totally.
That's numbing.
Numbing.
And
not dealing with
anything else.
And vulnerability isn't going to come out of anything unless you're living a real life.
Right.
A real life.
Yeah.
Right. And so the other thing about perfectionism, I just wanted to say this, which I thought, I think we like to think that we want people to think that we are perfect. I think a lot of people struggle with that, of wanting that. And Brene Brown says, she said this about perfectionism. Perfectionism is not a way to avoid shame. Because I think a lot of times we think, I'm ashamed about my childhood. I'm ashamed about my house. I'm ashamed about my body. I'm ashamed about whatever it is we're ashamed about. So I am going to make it look. I'm going to be uber diligent, uber this, and I'm going to make that thing perfect. She says, perfectionism is not a way to avoid shame. Perfectionism is a form of shame. Where we struggle with perfection, we struggle with shame. So whatever you're trying to be perfect in, whatever you're trying to mask, or you're scared to show the warts of in your life, that is where the shame is.
I totally agree with that.
So good.
Was that not I was like, oh.
Where we struggle with perfectionism
that is where we struggle with shame.
Yeah.
So if you're afraid to show the warts of that situation, that is, so with me, easy, quick example, for me, I am terrified that I will not be a good enough mother. Because of my past, did not have a good mother. I am terrified of that. I want to be a perfect mother. I want my children to rise up and call me blessed. I want my, people to, not have a childhood to overcome. I get a phone call. My daughter in college, who I adore, Izzy, is like, Mom, guess what? She is so excited to tell me this. I have started therapy. And my immediate instinct was, oh crap, what is she going to say? What hard things is she going to speak into my life? Because I know what therapy is. It's hard. And instantly made it about me. Selfish Amber. Here she comes. Because I instantly thought, what am I going to tell her? What are going to be my reasons of why I did whatever she's going to come and tell me that I did wrong? which are all PS hypothetical questions that have not even come to me,
Right.
and hypothetical, like it's already an entire story. I've got a novel, I've got an entire series.
Right.
It could be on Netflix.
Yeah.
It's deep and real.
Yeah.
And she and she starts telling me why. She had a really traumatic senior year. She had a really traumatic basketball season, and she was sharing it in a social work class. And her social worker was like, teacher was like, I think it benefits all therapists and social workers to have a therapist because it will help you be a better social worker. We have a free counseling. I think you need to unpack these certain things that have happened to you your senior year. And
So good.
I was like, and my instinct was, this is amazing. And then I turned into, so my shame
What is she gonna say about me?
is what she's going to say about me. And I looked, and so then, of course, I want to numb, and I want to keep it secret, and I don't want to tell anyone, so instead I say it on the podcast.
Yeah, good.
So I look at Peter, and I said, Peter, this is what I'm so ashamed. This was the first thing I thought is, what about me? And he smiled. He goes, I did that a little bit too.
Yeah.
He's like, but I think the way we should look at this is how incredible that our daughter's first person they wanted to call and tell that they were doing therapy are her parents. And that we have made therapy so unscary
Yeah.
that she's
Counseling's
ready
cool.
to voluntarily be vulnerable
Yeah. Yep. So
and
good.
start unpacking some of her stuff as a 19-year-old. And I stopped and I thought about it and I said, Peter, I was blue papered at 19 and put into Acadia Hospital, which is a mental institution, as an outpatient with a severe eating disorder so that I could start facing my demons. And my daughter joyfully was like, all right, I'm growing up and I need to start figuring some stuff out. Let's go. And I can't wait to tell my parents. Like,
Yeah. So good.
okay, Amber, get over yourself. This is beautiful. But that's my, I want to pretend that I got this. And that's the third one. So
And it's an opportunity for you to be vulnerable, for you to be like, okay,
I am.
that goes really well.
I watched a friend who is further down the road from me with her kids, and I just think so many times I want to be like her. She has a fabulous relationship with all her kids. They mock her relentlessly, but she can take it. Like, that's kind of how they, like, their love. Like, there's no doubt that they love her. But they're very clear about, I'm going to do this different than you did, Mom. And I'm going to do this different than you did. And she receives it, and they kind of can laugh about it a little bit. But I'm like, my first instinct, no matter what, I think would be like,
why?
because what I did wasn't good enough. It wasn't right.
Oh,
You know what I mean? And I don't want to be like that. And so when I watch her, I'm like, that's so good. Like, she holds it so loosely, and she's like, you go. Yeah, that's really great. I wish I'd thought to do that. And I'm like,
yes.
oh, I need.
That's what I want to say.
I don't want to view it instant, like, because that's my personality is. I'll view it as instant. Yep, and that's another place where I failed you. Oh, and I failed you there. And yep, thank you for pointing that one out. And we told all our kids, your first 10 sessions are on us.
Right.
You know, but like I say it
But that's-
kind of tongue in cheek, but kind of not.
But that's the thing. Like, that's your, like, you have said that your struggle is that you want to be, you're worth what you do. And so you put so much thought and effort into it. So if your children say to you, I'm going to do this different.
Which they do already.
Yes. But that makes you feel, I can totally see that. Like that. So that's vulnerability is feeling that. And could I go into shame and fear, or do I take it as love and freedom?
Yeah.
So we numb, we perfect, and perfect. Sorry, I always say perfect. We love, we perfect, and the last one is we pretend. And I thought, holy smokes, artichokes. Yes, we do. And so we pretend that everything is great. We pretend, that's sweeping it under the rug. We pretend that we lived in this fantastic world. We pretend that she used corporations in this. She's like, everybody knows there was the giant oil spill, and instead of the giant oil spill people saying, we made a mistake, we're really, really sorry, and this is our plan to fix it, we go, well, it really wasn't that bad, and really we did this instead, and how different life would be if we owned it. We owned those things. So when Izzy, not if, when Izzy comes to me and says, instead of me going, well, my mom was super abusive, so I could have hit you, I could have neglected you, instead saying, you know, I hear you, I'm sorry, I that wasn't my intention. What's the plan to fix this? How can I heal this wound that I've caused you? What's a plan? How can we move through that?
I know a pastor who, when he had 4 kids and his oldest boy, he's like, I just know I made so many mistakes with him, raising him, you know, and so recently he flew to his son's home and sat at his table and said, I want you to tell me all the ways that I hurt you, and I want us to make a plan for how I can fix it and how I can.
Could you imagine?
No,
Wow.
I can't. And I'm like, oh my gosh, you know, like just amazing and
so
brutal.
beautiful.
But,
Beautiful.
yeah,
That is rare.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Wow.
Well, I do remember one time sitting with Emma, and you know, Emma says a lot of people are so sorry for her that she was raised in such a religious home. And Emma doesn't feel sorry about it, which I'm thankful for. And she said to her friends once, it was literally the most, and I've told her several times, when you said that, it was probably the kindest thing she's ever said. She said, my parents are the first ones to, if I come to them with a complaint, they are the first ones to own it, explain it, and ask how I can help fix it. And all of her quote unquote secular friends, parents don't do that. And so she's like, so I don't know why you're upset. My parents are like geared for forgiveness. Like that's how they're like, they are geared to accept that they have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. So
I like that. Geared for forgiveness. Geared for grace.
Geared for grace.
yes, like just, I think that, so I kind of just wanted to, vulnerability takes courage. It takes courage to be, and she defined courage, and it means to find the core. It's kind of like muster. It's finding something deep within you that makes you do something even if you don't want to. So it's
Scary.
it's
scary.
not bravery. Bravery is different than courage. Bravery, there's a reward in the end of it, like usually like you get knighted. But courage, it's from within. It's not for a goal. It's from within.
Well, let's see what brave. It's like it's in a song. When a man is scared, that's the chance to be brave.
Yes.
But it is different. Courage is the summoning the.
I always think of martyrs when I think of courage.
Yes.
Like they
Yes.
they had the courage to not deny their faith, knowing
Right.
what the outcome would be.
The ability to do something that frightens oneself. The strength to face pain or grief.
Strength to face it.
So it's not the reward at the end is not good necessarily.
Right.
Right. So with bravery, that's like the must.
Isn't that kind of a synonym for each other though?
It may be, but it comes from
somewhere it intersects.
Sure,
But
yeah.
it comes from the Latin cor, which means heart.
heart. Yeah.
So it comes from inside versus
Courage, dear heart.
so
To me,
bravery.
it seems safe,
The
but-
bravery you get it from each other, right? Like I'm brave because you're brave, and so we link arms, and you're brave, and we're brave, and then we go and we face it together. Like I always say, when I think of bravery, I think of Braveheart and him marching on his face half blue, and he's on his horse, and he's rallying them. Courage is something.
Shot with the arrow into his naked butt.
Okay.
What?
Remember that scene?
Yes, I do. But for
I
courage,
don't remember that scene.
Courage-
Surprisingly,
courage is inside. There's nobody else involved necessarily. It's from one's own heart. It's taking that risk like a martyr. Like it's taking that risk to, like for me, even though it was silly for me to say to Peter, I'm being selfish right now because all I'm thinking about in this situation with Izzy going to therapy is what is she going to say about me?
It's a form of honesty. So it's like come as you are, take your wall down. I'm being really honest with who I am and how I feel, and telling it and speaking it.
Right.
Even though it might mean that you think less of me, or even though it might mean that you see my scars, my blemishes, even though it means that, and you might judge me and you might make assumptions, but I'm still going to do it.
Yes, that's the courage.
Yeah.
The second is compassion. And I thought this was really interesting, that unless you see your value, you cannot be vulnerable. And I thought that was huge for me in particular. So unless, and I think as Christians, this is where, Brene Brown, I don't know her faith, but her walk or whatever, but I know mine. And so if I treat myself poorly and I numb myself and I try to perfect myself and I try to pretend, I devalue myself and I devalue my ability to be vulnerable. And that is not, I want to say blasphemous, but I don't know if that's a real word for blasphemous, because we were bought at a price.
Cowardice-ish, or not really?
Yes.
That's such a harsh word.
But
I think that's
here's
one
the
of the
difference.
harshest words that you can, if someone's a coward, that's the lowest of the low.
Right.
I feel like.
But for
and
me,
it's
the
not
difference
that.
is this. It's you are not, we were bought for a price. And that price was Christ. And Peter's doing this whole sermon series on the mess, and that God knows our messiness and still died for us. He died for us in spite of our messiness. It's not like we go and wash ourselves up and then we go see him. God can't stop loving us, no matter how gross we are. And so for us to not be kind and see our value, we are devaluing Jesus' sacrifice.
Yeah, so true.
He was the most vulnerable, where he was
completely
and killed on a
yes,
cross.
he was, but we can't.
Yeah.
If we don't see our value, we cannot be vulnerable.
Well, you're all consumed with shame. If you're all consumed with shame and hiding and covering and building walls, then people
But
who
we're
value
devaluing,
yourself don't do those things.
And you also can't, I think, if you're so puffed with pride,
right,
be vulnerable either.
Which all that is
That's a
pretending.
whole different podcast.
Yes.
So no,
But
it's pretending. It's
right.
all that
It's
is shame.
Yeah.
In therapy, in counseling, when you start learning about feelings, those are
mirror opposites or whatever.
well, no, they're camouflage.
Yeah.
So you throw out a lot of anger. When people are really, really angry, it actually means they're really deeply sad.
I agree.
And when people are really, really, really prideful, it means they're actually super insecure.
Yeah.
So that's just like perfectionism is a type of shame. Pride is shame.
Absolutely.
When I see someone, I am trying to train myself that when I see someone super prideful, I want to learn to look at that and go, oh, they are so full of shame.
Or when someone, like a kid who's super cocky, I'm like, they're actually really insecure.
Scared.
Yeah.
They're scared.
Yeah.
And when someone is pretending, they're actually really sad or really, really angry. When I see someone responding in anger, I want to train myself when I see someone responding like that they're actually
there is
really
righteous
sad.
anger. There is a time to be
Yeah.
angry, but when it's a perpetual or of something that's coming from inside yourself or in
If that's your character.
if that's
That's
right,
Jesus-
hurting who you are.
Yeah. So
Then for
Jesus'
sure is
righteous
rooted in-
anger was
Sin.
Yeah, and it was a blip. I love people who always bring that. Not that you, but people are like, well, Jesus was angry. I was like, in the entire scriptures, he was one time did he lose his patience.
Yeah.
One time did he flip a table. And that was in the place of worship where things were not being done. He didn't flip the table at the prostitutes. He didn't flip the table at the woman at the well. He did not flip the table at the lepers. So I think you should check yourself before you wreck yourself when you talk. You know what I mean? If your character is anger,
Yes.
if your character is pride, then those are actually shame. And that is the beauty of it. When we learn to name what's actually happening and take take ourselves, and the only way we can do that, seriously and truly, the only way we can be vulnerable is if we value ourselves. And when I say value, I do not mean pride. Value that you were created by a God that loves you, created you in his image with worth and integrity,
Makes no mistakes.
who makes no mistakes, who is having you walk this path for his righteousness, and loved you so much that he sent his son to die on the cross for you. That is your value. Not your skin, not your exercise, not your skill on the court or your skill on the mat or your ability to teach or anything. Your value is in the essence of who you are. It's like that baby. And when she was talking, like when we grab our babies, I think having children, and if you are unable to have children, even adopting, like there is nothing like the vulnerability of a baby. It takes a monster to look at a baby and go, meh. When you see a baby wailing and crying, needing their diaper changed, or there is something that changes within you. I fell in love with Peter. Peter's character and how he treated others and how he treated me and how he walked through life is what made me fall in love with him. Emma came out of my body and I would take a bullet for her. She did nothing. Isabel came out of my body and I was like, I didn't think it was possible, but now my heart is bigger. And Parker and Thomas. That is the value that God has for us. The exact core value that you have when you see an infant and they do nothing for you. They give you nothing, and yet
they take a lot.
They take everything.
and they suck you dry and they ruin your body and your boobs now sag and all of the things.
And you couldn't love them.
And you would do
Anything.
anything for them. That is the value you need to believe in yourself. That's how much God loves you, and then you can be vulnerable. And that is
so good.
And that is where your life changes. And that is when you are able to speak into yourself, speak into other people. That's where you can lead. That's where you can parent. That's where you can change your little footprint. But it has to come from vulnerability. So the next couple of times we're going to keep pressing into it. But so vulnerability is the crossroads of love, creativity, and freedom, where we find our value in courage and compassion to love others and ourselves well. But it is also the place where fear, shame, and anxiety can build, where we numb, perfect, and pretend because we have shame. And so I want us to all think about it and start thinking about where that is in our lives.
I wrote down name your shame. Which,
Let's do that next.
Which for me, there's so many. Where do I start?
Well, we'll start next time. So
Okay.
we're going to start unpacking shame and unpacking these things so that we can truly have authentic lives. Because when we live authentically, when we take our walls down, that is where it changes. So, all right, let's get ready to name our shame next.
Name our shame. That's what a title. I love it. Name your shame.
Na 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 na.
Wow, that was really good.
Good. So good. And it's 11:55, guys. Look at us
Whoop,
go.
whoop.
Watch me cook. Okay. All right.
Okay, oops, I took my glasses off.
Oops,
really
I did it again. All right, so no one watched Usher last night?
Nope.
I did.
Oh, you did? Oh
Was it
my
good? Did you
gosh.
love it?
It was not bad compared
No,
to
it was
to so many other years where there was
everyone was
bodyguards
fully dressed.
Yeah, it
There was
not
one-
bad.
The streaker, right?
There was. They didn't show it.
They didn't.
Okay.
I didn't see it.
Oh, just the newscaster. They were just like, oh, there's a streaker. Oh, but nobody ever saw.
And there was one
anything.
time where there was a woman on the side and she was fully dressed, like she had like a unitard on, but she did a pole, like a little thing on like a pole, because they were roller skating and like
Okay.
she was on roller skates and she grabbed the pole and like swung up and came back down. And
Crazy.
this adorable boy whose family we're adopting them, and your guys are gonna all meet her, and her name's Elena, and her husband's name is Jesus, and he was born in Cuba.
What? Wait, before we talk about this, what title should we give this one?
No, finding your value and vulnerability.
Yeah, that's good.
It's a long title.
Oh.
Finding your value and vulnerability.
What is vulnerability?
Or vulnerability part 1.
All right, we'll workshop.
So, but her son's name is Elliot, and he's one of Parker's newest, greatest friends. And he literally, so we're all watching it, and all the moms were like, because this is Usher is like what was hip when we like when I was a dancer. I did my warm-ups all the time to Usher's songs and dance classes, and so we're like busting it out. We know all the names. Armani, his dad's like, oh gosh, not Usher. My dad Bliss is on the stereo, and it's so mad, embarrassing. And I was like, you know, he's this black kid, and so he's like, and so out comes Ludacris, and I go, what, Ludacris? And literally Armani goes, Parker, your mom gets mad props. She even knows who Ludacris is. I was like, do you want me to sing? And I literally, me and Elena started singing the entire song, and he was like, and then the pole dancer thing happened, and sweet Elliot goes, how do they do that?
I didn't see that.
It was super quick, and she was fully dressed, but and then at one point,
impressed with the fact that nobody was naked.
and well, he took his shirt off. He took his shirt off. And when he took his shirt off, all the guys were like, "Oh, wardrobe malfunction!" Like these wrestlers were so funny. They're like, and then they were like, "That's a Parker move," which totally embarrassed Parker. And then there was one part where he like got like really kind of like danced with Alicia Keys for a little bit, and they were like intimate, but like
it wasn't
no
near where it's been in the past.
but my boys,
So sad that there's
those
this
wrestlers
sliding
were
scale.
like, the wrestlers were like, hey, she's married. And I was like, that's right, boys, consent. We believe in consent. You never touch a woman without talking to her. You don't. And Parker goes, talk to her. You should be married. And like, it was like this hysterical, and like half the boys, they aren't believers. And they're
So
like in this
funny.
house where we're like, consent, consent.